Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Bullish Sports Podcast with your host, Steve Parada. We have Dave and Mikey Vandiar behind the glass. Adam Zadroic is off abroad in Europe. He will not be here today as we go through the initial podcast for the 2014 NFL Draft. I'm going to break down the top 5 picks to start off with. There's a lot of options at the top for the teams there. They're obviously not great teams. It's the reason why they're picking in the top 5. And I wanted to go into some reasoning for each one of my picks. Before we even get into that, the draft is going to be a little different this year. It's going to be held in early May rather than late April. They pushed it back about a couple weeks. It's going to be the 8th through the 10th of May. The first round being that Thursday night. It starts in prime time. They just do the first round. Second and third round Friday, 4 through 7 Saturday. It's changed quite a bit over the last few years, and I mean, the NFL knows what it's doing. It's really not an issue that they pushed it back 2 weeks. It gives your team, whatever team you're a fan of, 2 extra weeks to prep for the draft. So before we even get into picks, I need to explain exactly how I went about mocking this draft. I went about it as if I was the GM of the team and I was making the picks. The other way to mock a draft would be to do it as if who you think the team is going to pick, not what you would actually pick. So I'll do it that way. It's almost impossible to predict the NFL draft. Each team has 5 or 6 guys that they could realistically take in the top 5, depending on who falls to them, depending on their needs. A lot of teams have obviously multiple needs, so obviously multiple guys makes sense. Let's start with Houston. So Houston, first overall, Greg Robinson, left tackle, Auburn. I haven't actually really heard much talk about him even projected there, let alone he hasn't visited. They just haven't been connected to him since the whole draft process has started. Most of the reason why is because Houston already has a left tackle, Dwayne Brown, all-pro left tackle. He's one of the better tackles in the league, but he's turning 29 in August. So going into this year, he'll be 29. He is pretty hefty on the cap number. He's jumping from $5 to $8.5 million in terms of cap hit. And after this year, the Texans can cut him without penalty. They'll actually save $4.5 million on the cap if they cut him after next year. I'm not saying he's not good, but the Texans don't have a huge amount of needs. They obviously need a quarterback. They need a right tackle. They could use an inside linebacker, and they could use some help in the secondary. When you take Robinson with the first overall pick, you slide him into right tackle, you give him a year to adjust the NFL. He's not that proven of a pass protector yet. So at right tackle, he could focus on what he does best, which is run blocking. He's a dominant run blocker. You have him sit there for a year. After next year, then you have options. You can cut Brown. You could seek a trade, sort of like what Jacksonville did. They had the second pick in the draft last year, and what'd they do? They drafted a left tackle, even though they already had a left tackle in Eugene Monroe. They traded Monroe to Baltimore for a 4th and 5th round pick, and now Jokel is their starting left tackle. So this wouldn't be so unheard of if Houston did something like this. Also, you got to remember they now have Bill O'Brien, who's probably going to be making this pick. It's going to be his pick. And when you think about Bill O'Brien, he's a quarterback guru. He wants to try and mold any quarterback to be successful in his system, kind of like what Trestman did in Chicago. He comes in, Cutler, Josh McCown have career years. These guys are quarterback gurus. They run great offenses. Bill O'Brien is one of those guys. And his thinking may be, hey, I can get a dominant offensive lineman, solidify the right side of the line. I could draft a quarterback in the 2nd or 3rd round, a guy like Savage, a guy like Garoppolo, maybe Derek Carr. You never know. I think he goes that route. I think he sits tight with quarterback and waits into the 2nd or 3rd round to select his signal caller. And don't forget they signed Ryan Fitzpatrick. I know Keenum's probably their starter on the depth chart right now, but Fitzpatrick is the type of guy that Bill O'Brien could teach that system to and create something successful. I know I used McCown as a comparison before, but again, that's something that's realistic for a guy like Bill O'Brien. So Robinson to the Texans. 2nd pick in the draft, we have the Rams. who are still reaping the benefits of the trade they made with the Redskins, which landed Washington RG3. This first-round pick, which is second overall, is courtesy of Washington, so still very much benefiting from that deal. I have them with Jake Matthews, the left tackle from Texas A&M, protected Johnny Manziel's blind side the last few years. Matthews gives the Rams flexibility, and they have a big decision to make. Do they want to stick with Jake Long past 2014? Long tore his ACL and his MCL in December of 2013. He is extremely highly paid. If the Rams wanted to, they draft Matthews, they stick him at left tackle when Long is out this year. If he cuts it, if he's good, if he can handle it, you cut Long after 2014, you save $8 million on the cap. Matthews doesn't work out. He's not a good left tackle. He could be better somewhere along the line. He's very, very athletic. He's very flexible. He can play pretty much anywhere on the line. You have a stud in a right tackle already in Joe Barksdale. If, halfway through the season, Matthews is struggling, you put him at right tackle and put Barksdale at left tackle. Long comes back, Barksdale goes back to right tackle, Long to left tackle. Matthews can play any one of the guard positions. So I like that pick a lot for them. I don't think they need to go crazy. I don't think they need to draft a quarterback. I think Fisher gives Bradford one more year, and then he can be cut. You can save $12 million with them. I know Watkins might be a consideration, but they just drafted Tavon Austin in the first round last year and Stedman Bailey in the third round last year. Clowney would be really nice to add to Chris Long and Robert Quinn and Willie Hayes, but there's just a logjam there, and I don't know if you want Clowney playing an outside linebacker position in a 4-3 defense. I think the Rams go with left tackle, and that's what I would do if I were them. Moving on, third pick, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who don't really have a ton of needs. If you look at their team, it's not as bad as one might seem to think. Their GM, David Caldwell from Atlanta, I think this is the time now to get that franchise quarterback. I think they go with Bridgewater. The defense has some holes. Gus Bradley is their head coach. He's the former defensive coordinator of the Seahawks. This is his second year there, so he's had a year to get used to the players. He's got some of his guys in there now. They went out and they signed Chris Clemens and Red Bryan, who played for Seattle. Those guys are going to be the bookend defensive ends. And they will help rebuild that defensive line along with Badman. 3 older guys, but I think they're stopgap guys, which makes me think that they don't want to look at Clowney or they don't want to look at Mack right now. What they want to do is they want to get that offense going in the right direction. They took a left tackle in the first round last year. They have Justin Blackman. They have Cecil Shorts, Mercedes Lewis. Their running backs are not that legit. They have Todman. They just signed Gerhardt this offseason. Nothing spectacular there. Nothing to write home about. But, Todman could emerge. Even then, they could use help at running back. I'm sure they'll probably draft one later. So here I think Jacksonville grabs their franchise quarterback. Caldwell's happy with that. They move forward, and they have the face of their franchise. Next up, we have the Cleveland Browns, who seem to always be picking in the top 5. I've seen a lot of people call for a quarterback for them, and yes, they do need a quarterback. They need an upside franchise quarterback. They have Hoyer back for this year. He won a few games for them last year before he went down. So I'm going to go with Mike Evans here. The 6'5" receiver from Texas A&M. I know a lot of places are going to have Watkins ahead of Evans, and Watkins certainly may be the better prospect. But when you're drafting in the top 5, you're not just drafting the best available player. You're drafting the guy that's going to fit your team, perfectly. With the Browns, you have Josh Gordon as the number 1 receiver who led the league in yards last year. He's more similar to Watkins than he is to Evans. Evans is a go up in the air, catch it at its highest point kind of player. He thinks he could be an all-purpose receiver, and he certainly may be. But at this point, from what we've seen from him, he's the Alshon Jeffrey of the Browns. That's what he would be. And Marshall is Gordon. So that's the way I think they should go. When you have a guy like Kyle Shanahan, he thinks he can mold any quarterback to be successful in his system. Most likely roll with Hoyer the first year, draft, someone like Garoppolo, Carr, Tommy Savage from Pittsburgh in the second or third round. Let that quarterback sit a year, learn, and comes into an elite offense that has Gordon, Jordan Cameron, Nate Burleson, Ben Tate, Andrew Hawkins, and a good offensive line. So I think most quarterbacks would be successful in that kind of offense, and that's why I think Shanahan realizes that and passes on one in the first round. Browns draft a receiver, Mike Evans. Moving on to the last pick in the top 5, which belongs to the Oakland Raiders. I have them with Jadeveon Clowney, the defensive end from South Carolina. They took care of their quarterback need in the offseason when they signed Matt Schaub to compete with the incumbent Terrell Pryor and Matthew McGloin, who were both not realistic long-term options. So I think that's why they brought in Schaub to be kind of a stopgap guy before they have to draft a quarterback in the first round. So I think they stay away from quarterback. They could use probably another receiver. Denarius Moore, Andre Holmes, and Streeter are their top three, and none of them are number ones, but they would fill out a nice 2, 3, 4 in a wide receiver rotation. So, a guy like Watkins, or if Evans is there, will be options. But I think when Clowney's on the board at 5, that's when you take the best available player. They don't have glaring needs anywhere else. They have brought in Justin Tuck. They brought in Lamar Woodley and Antonio Smith. They drafted a cornerback high last year. They have some solid pieces, so they get Clowney to be that kind of the anchor of that defense. He is the best pass rusher in this class. He has what some guys say, Hall of Fame upside, which is rare for a defensive end to just say that coming out of the draft, but that's what he has. He has that kind of talent. He has off-the-field issues, but I think a lot of GMs and coaches are confident that they could fix a guy when they come to their respective franchise. So Mackenzie takes Clowney to round out our top 5. Next week, we will dive in picks 6 through 10, which starts off with the Falcons, who are picking at 6, ending with the Lions, who are picking at 10. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and have a great week.